How inspiring to follow such great policymakers who are clearly passionate about the College Completion Fund. My name is Kelly McManus. I am the Director of Higher Education at Arnold Ventures, and I'm thrilled to be with you all today to have an impressive group of panelists talk about the importance of college completion. We have a limited time together, so I am going to keep the introduction short and get right into the conversation. I do encourage you, though, to look at the chat to learn more about our panelists. So today you will be hearing from Amanda Martinez, a senior policy analyst at UnidosUS, formerly the National Council of La Raza. Lelani Mercado, the chief program officer at Project Quest in San Antonio. Tania Crawford Gross, the associate vice president of retention and student success at Kentucky's Bluegrass Community and Technical College. And Chandra Scott, the executive director of Alabama Possible, a nonprofit organization breaking down barriers to prosperity in Alabama. So I want to start where both Representative Castro and Senator Heinrich started, which is we have traditionally, in our country focused more on trying to get people to school, but not as much focus on getting them through school. So I'd love to start and hear from y'all on the kinds of barriers. What keeps students from completing? What are some of the barriers that they encounter on their path to a degree? And how do those vary for today's students, particularly students of color, students from low-income backgrounds, students who have to work, and caretaking students? So Chandra, I'd love to start with you.
Sure, Kelly. So first, I want to say I'm so glad to be a part of this conversation because there has never been a more important time to focus on post-secondary completion. As our country and our communities continue to weather economic instability, the pandemic, as well as the most recent wave of racial reckonings, we've seen how barriers threaten the success of today's college students and derail their plans to complete a degree. I would say a listing of barriers, just a small listing of them, just to get us started from my thoughts, are just a lack of equitable and affordable access to broadband. Then there's this whole narrative around debt forgiveness for adult learners and the barriers that it brings along with low to no technological capacity at our institutions, especially those who serve a large population of students of color and adult learners and those from low-income backgrounds. But in Alabama, I'm pleased to say we've also seen how innovative and equity-driven programs have responded to these challenges and have supported these students through these uncertain times. And I look forward to sharing that later in our conversation.
Thank you for having me. There are so many barriers that our families are facing today. Academically, being challenged to even start the classes that they need to start, financially having the resources to even start classes. And Representative Castro stated it very well that families are challenged with having to go to work or go to school, and they have to face those challenges every day because they either have to pay their bills and survive, or they have an opportunity to go to college. And a lot of times the financial responsibilities will take over and that person then has to quit school. But there's several challenges, but there's also several opportunities, like Chandra said, where we can collaborate with our community colleges to provide braided support for our participants so that they don't fail, they don't quit school, and that they are successful. But it really takes a lot of support from the workforce intermediaries like Project Quest and also the community colleges working together to really support a participant from end to end.
And Tania?
I appreciate this question because it's so important that everyone listening today understand the challenges that can lead to students stopping out. As open access institutions, community colleges are often the entry points for low-income students, students of color, and adult students. These students face a myriad of barriers that can disrupt their educational careers. Their educational aspirations can be derailed by even the smallest disruption, an illness, academic struggles, financial setback, not to mention a pandemic, the likes we've not seen in generations. Institutions must be committed and have the structures in place to re-engage with these students in order to support their goal of earning an academic credential. These supports must be available not only to support the academic challenges, but also the non-academic barriers to success. For far too long, when a student fell behind or stopped out, it was seen as an individual failing instead of a systemic problem in which the higher education institution shared the responsibility for ensuring student success. As part of the Degrees When Due initiative, Bluegrass Community and Technical College launched Project Finish, which was an effort to reach out to students who left the institution before earning a degree. The aim of the pilot was to make students aware of how close they were to completing their credential and to encourage re-enrollment to complete their degree. BCTC is committed to solving the persistent problem of demographic disparities, and our institutional leaders place an emphasis on looking critically at our student success policies and practices to make the reforms necessary to maximize a return for all students. As part of our efforts to create a culture of care, at BCTC, we regularly conduct call campaigns. Our message to students is, you are part of a community that really cares about your success, and that success includes completing college.
That's great. So one of the things that we know is that the supports that students need, they don't just come out of nowhere. They don't just appear. It takes a lot of effort and really dedicated people who are committed to student success. And a program leader recently shared with us that their team is small but mighty and mighty tired. And I can imagine that that is true. Y'all, especially those of y'all who are directly serving students, are doing so often with very little capacity, both technological, human capacity, and financial capacity. And you are serving students at schools that have also historically been under-resourced in our system. So I'm curious to hear more about the capacity challenges, and in particular, especially in this moment, as you know, currently right now in about 30 minutes, the House Education and Labor Committee is going to be voting on a bill that would put $9 billion into college completion. As you heard from Senator Heinrich, he is pushing for the full $62 billion, which would be incredible. Talk about the capacity issues you face, and also what this federal funding could do for you. And Tania, we'll start with you.
Yes, the challenges to supporting the re-engagement process for colleges have to do, as you just mentioned, with the ability to re-engage with this substantial population of stop-outs. The institutional needs include having the technology, the personnel, and the funds to support the returning student. The most significant barrier for students is often the finances needed to return. Finances to pay the tuition and fees associated with re-enrolling. And many students must also overcome the financial challenge of an outstanding balance and the resulting stranded credits that must be attended to before they can re-enroll. Our review of student accounts found small balances of only a few dollars up to thousands of dollars owed to the institution. The Project Finish initiative, piloted by Bluegrass, provided debt forgiveness and a small scholarship for near completers who had 45 or more credit hours. This financial capacity is critically important to help students successfully finish their degree. The need to support and improve college completion really cannot be overstated. It is an investment from which we can all benefit. The ability for post-secondary institutions, and in my case, a two-year institution, to invest funds into the completers and near completers yields more graduates who transfer to a four-year institution. And additionally, for community colleges, by awarding more certificates and diplomas, we are able to get more trained citizens into the workforce and provide more economic opportunities for underrepresented populations.
Chandra?
Sure. So I would say in Alabama alone, there are over 62,000 adult learners who you can categorize as having some college, no degree. In our state, we have a post-secondary attainment goal of having 500,000 Alabamians that, are highly skilled, a valuable credential that will fulfill our workforce by 2025. However, to meet that goal, we must rethink how we invest in our institutions that are being very intentional about re-engaging adult learners. Here we have an Alabama Degrees When Due cohort of 4 institutions that were doing just that were focusing specifically on re-engaging adult learners across our state. Now, I will be honest, I'm that person that's a little nosy and like to understand the process. And so I participated to look at what the auditing process looked like at the institution. And I have to be honest, I was quite shocked to see how this was manually done when we're in a time where literally I can send money to someone across the country using my mobile device, but yet we're still having to manually audit to re-engage learners in our institutions. This cannot be the practice in which we're engaging students. It limits the number of students we can re-engage. So if we're looking at 62,000 adult learners across our state, but we're having to manually go through each one of those, can you only imagine how much limitations that is giving our leaders at our institutions to be able to re-engage those adults? The technological capacity is a major, major barrier to getting more adults across the finish line. And as we all know, especially those who like to talk about the business line of it, this is a workforce strategy, getting more adults back into education across the finish line. So truly, if we cannot invest in the technological capacity of our institution, it is going to be a barrier to our workforce development.
Lelani, what about y'all?
So I agree with both ladies about the technology being a divisive key for individuals trying to go to college. But I also think that we need to meet people where they're at. And so some of our participants are not even quite ready for the technology to even navigate registering for classes at a community college. And so what we consider are basically the most important key to our organization is the one-on-one coaching with our participants so that they can help them navigate those systems. They need a career coach, is what we call them, to really guide them on how to register for classes, how to use technology, how to basically remove the barriers that they might have while they're in training. And I think that those resources are just as important as getting navigated into a community college system. In addition, providing customized support services for individuals is extremely important. Not everybody comes in and has the same needs. Some may need mental health counseling, some may need academic remediation, and some may need financial resources and support services to help them navigate going to school. And so those are the key factors that I think for our organization, especially here in San Antonio, where we have a very low high school graduation rate, is needed.
Great, thanks. I will say I am honored to be a part of this powerhouse group of women. Although I will say we were hoping to have a student with us today. So often in our policy conversations here in DC, where I physically am, we talk about students, but we don't actually hear directly from them. And so Terrance Wiggins, a student at Georgia State, was scheduled to be with us today. But as can happen in the life of a senior in college, especially, he has had a last minute scheduling conflict. But he did put together a video for us just to quickly share how a program at Georgia State, the MAPS program, a proactive data-informed advising program, helped him on his way. So I'll turn it over to Terrance now.
My name is Terrance Wiggins. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, from the east side of Atlanta, and I grew up basically in Atlanta my whole life. So I attended Arabian Mountain High School, which is over in Latonia, Georgia, and it was also a theme school. So it was actually not public, everybody couldn't get in it, and you also had to keep a 2.5 GPA just to stay in the school. So it actually brought me to a better understanding of school, just how you have to stay on top of the game even in high school, and how it would be in college, so it also prepared me for college. I would say also, I'm a photographer and videographer. This is my senior year at Georgia State. And I started off as a business major, and later, just figuring out what things that I like to do and things I don't like to do, I found an interest in photography and videography, which caused me to change my major to media entrepreneurship. Throughout my time here at GSU, I found it very difficult to, schedule your classes on your own. With GSU MAPS programs, they have advisors who reach out to you to make sure that students are on track, are doing what they're supposed to do. They're making sure that the students are ahead of the game. Most students try to wait till last minute to try to register for classes when most of them are already filled. But when you have the MAPS program, they have advisors who will contact you through email to come out and, just tell you hey, next semester classes are opening up soon. Let's go ahead and get this schedule situated. So when the class is opening up for registration, you can be one of the first people in the class to get it out the way. I'll also say it was a substantial part of me being a successful student at GSU. Without helping with classes, I honestly probably would be picking the wrong classes each semester, honestly. That's just facts. Just me looking at the classes that I was supposed to take and then classes that I probably would want to take on my own, that would just lead me into another direction that will have me graduating at a later time period. A lot of students do need help. As far as me, I come from a home where we don't have it all the time. My parents just can't give me everything that I need. Some things I have to go out and I have to work for on my own. And one of those things is being school. Getting up there in age, my parents have other things they have to work for, bills due, just groceries, taking care of family, just everything. So I had to step out on my own and get a job so that I can pay for my school. And I'm not always able to pay for the full thing. So just like this past summer, I was able to receive a grant from the school, which is the PRG grant. And basically, they covered the rest of my costs for my classes for the semester. And honestly, that really helped me. So one thing I just wanted the policymakers to see is that we as students, we do need help, and we're looking for more and more ways that we can see that we can get our school paid for, or is anything grants, just without getting so deep into debt, because that's my personal thing. I don't want to take out a whole bunch of loans, which will lead me later into debt when I'm in school to find a better life.
So Amanda, I want to bring you in after that. So we heard from Terrance directly from the student. We have heard from both nonprofit and school leaders here on our panel. Let's go up to the policy level and what's happening across the country. What are you seeing in kind of national completion trends, and how do you think that the College Completion Fund would help institutions better serve their students?
Well, first, I want to give a shout out to Terrance. Hopefully, if he sees this, I think what his story shared was true and real, and really is the transformative change that we can see across the board. But back to the question, Kelly, that you posed. The short answer is completion trends are dire. They were dire before the pandemic, and now they're probably going to be catastrophic just because of the disenrollment that we're seeing and the stop outs that we're seeing now. But why are we talking about completion? Terrance kind of encapsulated it, is that, the transformation that higher education promises is through completion, right? If you don't complete, your complete life trajectory could be derailed into a completely different negative net benefit. Higher education the promise only comes after you finish the line. And what we're seeing, unfortunately, across the nation is dire completion trends that are stratified across racial and ethnic and socioeconomic lines. For instance, when looking at a 2014 cohort of students trying to graduate in the timeline of 6 years, we see that Black and Latinx students graduate less than half compared to their white their white counterparts in that same cohort. White students graduated at over 67%. So that percentage point gap, or that completion gap, is over 18 points. That's not, that was pre-pandemic. Imagine what we're going to be seeing in the next future when we see future cohorts. And that was already dire. And if we don't do anything now, if we're not proactive now, that gap is just going to widen. The trajectory of our students who need these funds the most and this help the most right now are going to be suffering. And that's not just for individuals, right? That's going to be for their families are going to be suffering, and it's going to be suffering for the communities they're living in. It's going to be a suffering experience for the nation. So that's why we're having this conversation today. But really, we should have hope. I'm going to bring in the hope of the evidence-based programs that we've heard today from all the leaders across the board who've answered those other questions. It really should give us hope. It should give us energy to be a part of this conversation today. It should really give members of Congress, excitement to finally be able to put something forward that works. Like, for example, at Georgia State, we see that from Terrance's experience. Specifically, that program, the MAPS program, improved 9 percentage points of their graduation rate across racial lines, racial and ethnic lines, and income level lines. And it closed those gaps just at Georgia State alone, which is very impressive. Other programs mentioned here, like Project Quest in Texas, they are able to provide holistic supports. But really, what did that take? It took human capacity, it took technological capacity, and it takes financial capacity. And in order to do that, we can scale these at a statewide and an institutional and nationwide way. And while these states like Georgia and Texas and others who are implementing these programs, siloed, they really need help to scale them. This is exactly what the federal government's role is. So we really do need to support the College Completion Fund in whatever way we do. Everyone needs to be a part of it. And I think advocates are clearly aligned on this, and we have a solution in front of us.
Great. So I'm going to one last question for the panel before we get to Q&A from the audience, but it's going to key off of what Amanda, you just said. Like, this is the role of the federal government. This is what we should be doing. And so I'd love to hear from all of y'all. What is one thing that you want policymakers to take away from today's conversation? And Chandra, we'll start with you.
Sure. So first, this has been an amazing, amazing panel. I'm just honored to be amongst all of you. But I would say during the onset of the pandemic, we saw great attention given to K-12 students and increasing their access to broadband. So they had equitable access for remote learning, right? This same attention and intentionality must be provided to post-secondary learners. This will enable our institutions to quickly re-engage our adult learners, and also provide them with individualized entry pathways. But this has to be done by automating the auditing process, degree auditing process. To me, that was the one thing that I would like to leave behind, is for them to remember that something must be done.
Great. Lelani?
The number one thing I'd like policymakers to understand is that workforce development is hard and it takes time. You cannot transform individuals' lives in 6 months. It does take a longer term investment, not only in the individual through human capacity, but also through financial resources to support that individual. Again, we are meeting people that are further behind educationally, and they need time to catch up to be at college level, just to even enter a community college. And those things take time and resources. And so again, those are the things that I hope our policymakers understand, that the investment can't be a one-time investment for 1 year. It has to be a longer term investment financially and supporting the human capacity of that.
I'd like to share what one of my Kentucky degrees when due colleague said. She put it best. It's a tragedy that there are so many students who have so many credits, but no degree. There is more that we can do to help re-engage these students who stopped out short of a degree and support them across the degree finish line. Funding the College Completion Fund can make that happen by supporting evidence-based, equity-centered, student-focused approaches to student re-engagement.
And Amanda?
Yeah, I think the last message is that, clearly we have a catastrophic problem in front of us. But there's hope. And if we want to close equity gaps, realize those economic, both financial or non-financial economic benefits that higher education can have towards our society. And if we want to be aligned with the Build Back Better message and campaign, then we've got to build capacity and support college completion, support these amazing practitioners on the ground who know what they're doing. In particular, we know that if we're funding these programs and practices, who's going to benefit is the students we care about the most, which are those who've been completely shut out historically from college. And they're continuously being pushed to the wayside if we don't do anything now. And we're just gonna, continue to create inequities if we don't do anything now. So this is your one-time chance, and it's now. You can be proactive about it. Let's do it.